Hello and welcome to another episode of Colour Chemistry with me, the Spin Doctor. This time we're going to be tackling the cobalt pigments. Now these are mineral pigments, they are granulating, they lift reasonably well, and they are quite a nice varied group. There is no other group of inorganic pigments that gives one the level and variety of colour that we get with the cobalts. So let me just adjust the tripod a little bit and we'll explore them all. So first of all, and these are Winsor & Newton professional colours, and I've got the paint catalogue number on the left. So 016 Aureolin or Aureolin if you want to pronounce it the French way, otherwise known as cobalt yellow. So if you can't pronounce it, call it cobalt yellow. It's a beautiful, beautiful yellow, and if you do it nice and thin, it doesn't have any kind of grey edge to it. Don't be disheartened when you get it from the tube. It might look a bit grey. Dry it down in the palette and when you use it, that grey just vanishes. If you get a grey tone on paper, you're using it too thick. It works best nice and thin. Cobalt Blue next, 178, I think a popular favourite. Most of us use Cobalt Blue a fair amount. It's a lovely colour, lifts really well. Look at that granulation, and this is not a very thick layer. I haven't put this on very carefully, I've just slapped it on. And this isn't even watercolour paper, this is just a sheet of cardstock because I don't want to use my good watercolour paper just for a bit of demonstrating. Next cab off the rank, we have 190 Cobalt Turquoise. Again, beautiful granulation, nice teal colour, really, really strong. You can get it quite thin if you look around the edges. You can get it reasonably thinly applied, and you can see right here I've got it really thin, just where it's just caught there, right on the edge of the puddle. Cobalt Violet next, 192. This is an absolute favourite of mine. I love this colour. It's a strongly granulating, beautiful, beautiful, bright, vivid purple, and I really like this. I find it really invaluable when I paint botanicals. It's just, there is nothing quite like this. Let me see if I can get this to autofocus. I bet it won't do it. There we go. You can really appreciate the granulation and how you can layer it up, which is what I did with all of these, incidentally. I painted them on once very thin, and then I painted them on again a bit thicker, and that's how I kind of got these random puddles. And finally, Cobalt Green, or not finally, nearly finally, Cobalt Green, 184. I put this one on a little bit too thick, to be honest. Again, a lovely granulating green, beautiful colour, and it goes well with Cobalt Turquoise. Finally, 137 Cerulean Blue, which a lot of people don't realise is a cobalt colour. It's not the same as Cobalt Blue, it's very different. You may have a set where it is coded as Pigment Blue 15, that is a fake Cerulean Blue. You have got a phthalo blue with a granulating medium mixed in with it, or you have chalk grains coated in phthalo blue. True Cerulean Blue is usually a cobalt pigment, and it looks like this. What you'll notice if I zoom out, and I'm going to turn the camera around so that you can see all of them together, can you see that they actually all kind of go well together? Probably I would say these five go well together a little bit more than the Aureolin does, but there's a reason for that. There's a chemical reason why these look more similar to each other than Aureolin. And to explain it, I'm going to start with Cobalt Blue. Sorry, I had a technical issue there, so I'm just going to have to reshoot part of this video as it didn't work too well. Cobalt pigments, just going to go through what they are, and I'm going to start with Cobalt Blue. It is Pigment Blue 28, which is a cobalt aluminate. So note the cobalt, if it's the first word, that means it's the positively charged part of a compound. The second part is the negatively charged part. So the cobalt is the positively charged part, so it's acting like a metal normally would. Metals are normally the first part. And okay, aluminium is part of the second part, but we'll work around that. Cobalt Turquoise is cobalt chromite, so it's a compound of cobalt and chromium and oxygen. So this was aluminium and oxygen, or aluminum and oxygen if you're based in the US. And that's Pigment Blue 36. I made a mix up here when I was putting them out, but Cobalt Green is cobalt titanate, so cobalt, titanium and oxygen, which is Pigment Green 50, and Cobalt Violet is cobalt phosphate, Pigment Blue 14, so cobalt phosphorus and oxygen. And finally, Cerulean Blue is cobalt stannate, which has nothing to do with Mr. Baratheon, Lord Baratheon? Well, he's dead, it doesn't really matter, does it? I know he's not dead in the books, don't comment that. Stannate comes from stannus or stannum, which is tin. So it's cobalt, tin and oxygen, and that's pigment blue 35. The odd one out, if you like, which I think I had just mentioned before the video cut out, is Aureolin Cobalt Yellow, which is potassium cobaltinitrite, pigment yellow 40. Note the cobalt is in the second part of the compound. So in terms of the crystal structure, these have all got fairly similar crystal structures, and this is the odd one out. Of these ones, the Cobalt Blue, Cobalt Turquoise and Cobalt Green, these are actually all got structures in the spinel group of minerals. So we've got blue spinel, blue-green spinel, and green spinel. The phosphate and the stannate are totally different. But you can see they've all got a similarity. They've all got this granular quality. It's a beautiful granulation, and I really like particularly Cobalt Violet when I'm painting botanicals. Cobalt Turquoise I think is kind of underused. I certainly underuse it. But doesn't it look pretty when we use it with Cobalt Violet? Lovely granular qualities there. Cobalt Blue, we all know and love that. We use it a lot. Very granular, it lifts really well. Down at the bottom here we've got the Cobalt Green, again, granular, goes really well with the purple. And Cerulean, again, does really well. Now some people have Cerulean Blues that are made of pigment blue 15. That's phthalo blue. What you've got is a fake one that's made by mixing chalk with phthalo blue to give a similar granular effect. My advice, chuck it and buy a proper one, because real Cerulean Blue isn't that opaque and it works much, much better. Gives you this beautiful granular texture that you just can't get with the fake ones, or hues as they're termed. Aureolin is quite different. Aureolin is firstly slightly soluble in water, so it will stain very slightly. Now don't be worried by Aureolin. I don't know whether I've already said this because I haven't been through all the stuff that cut out, but it can look a bit grey when you dry it down or when you use it from the tube. If you dilute it with enough water, when it dries on the paper, you lose that grey. So the camera's struggling to focus on it because it's so thin around the edges. But I just wanted to show there is no grey. Very slight granularity, not enormous, but it will stain very slightly because it's slightly soluble. So that tiny bit will stay dissolved and will stick to the page. So you'll get a little bit of staining there. But that's the cobalt group, and I think it can be interesting sometimes to consider a whole group of minerals like these ones here and think about, well, actually, these are all chemically related to one another, and certainly these 5 look really nice together. So it could be really interesting to paint some pictures using just those as a limited palette and see where you get with a cobalt-only picture. Now, I know some people will be going, but cobalt's toxic. Don't worry about it, because the amount you're using is pitiful. I'm going to do a video on toxicity of minerals in paints, I promise, and believe me, it is really, really small. I did calculate for cadmium red how many grams of paint you'd need to eat to harm yourself, and it's quite a lot. You probably feel quite sick just from eating the paint. Forget about the actual toxic effects. It's kind of overplayed, I think. It was worse in the olden days when everything had high amounts of lead. They don't anymore. What I would say, though, is that they are harmful to the environment. So when you're flushing your paint water away, please, please use lots of water and make sure it goes into the sewers. So if you live somewhere that has a septic tank, you may be better off keep saving it up or pouring it into cat litter and sending it to landfill, because I'd really rather these did not go into septic tanks where they could kill the bacteria that are necessary for your septic tank to function. They're probably fine in the sewage works, because if you think about how many millions of gallons of water leave the area you live in every day and head down the sewer, they get diluted out. So don't worry too much, but do run them down with plenty of water, because what we don't want to do is harm the bacteria necessary for the sewage works to function. And we also don't want these going out into rivers and so on in high concentrations. I know some people pour them into their gardens. Again, I think that's probably worse than letting it go down the sewers. If you're worried at all, just soak it into cat litter. Soak your paint water into a bucket of cat litter, and then just put the cat litter into refuse to go into either incineration or landfill, up to you. So those are the cobalts. Obviously there are other cobalt containing colours, but these are the main ones. I hope you enjoy using them. They're amongst my favourites. Thank you very much.